Thank you. It's good to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Matt. I am here to do this really cool panel here with our prime sponsors, right? These guys had a great event last night. I missed it, unfortunately, but I heard it was amazing. And I actually think we changed the name of the panel to CoMotion on the Water. I was thinking maybe CoMotion on the ocean, but smoke on the water is probably not a good, yeah, we don't want that. But, you know, unlocking urban waterways, if you look at the description, you know, it talks about ferries, it talks about innovation on the water and the ecosystem and where we are and where we need to go. And, you know, it's amazing what's happening right now in the last couple of months, in the last year. And when I first saw some of the, at prior conferences, some of the interesting things that these two gentlemen are doing, I was very, very inspired. And now it looks like it's ready for takeoff and, or landing, whatever you want to call it. So I have a lot of different hats, and I'm going to introduce my panelists. But first, a little bit about my involvement in this. I have nothing to do with ferries until the last, you know, 5 to 6 years. I was the longest-serving taxi commissioner, so I was a landlubber for many, many years in New York City. I was a regulator, and I have 3 hats that I wear. I am the president of the International Association of Transport Regulators, which is a multimodal group of anything from government regulators that regulate taxis, scooters, ride-hailing, ferries, AAM. It's really one of the only group of regulators that regulates pretty much everything in a multimodal universe.
So from our energy and focus right now was to try and find a solution to that and create, if you will, a business that centers on changing, if you will, the experience on the coast. So we see, basically what we see when we're up there is almost like a 10-lane highway that is totally underutilized. And so from our perspective, we thought, well, are there products out there and technologies out there that could make use of that? And we stumbled across Regent, I think 18 months ago, and we went to go and visit them, and we ended up realizing how far they had got with the product that they were developing, and set about really trying to understand how that application could work in the coastal waters, certainly up in the Northeast. The density of opportunity up there is substantial. The connections that we could provide up there were large, and we started to look at the cost base that this particular technology could provide, and we found that its cost of operation was substantially lower, if you will, than virtually everything else, helicopters and like. So when we went down that pathway, we were very quick to kind of understand the opportunity. So the 25 then set about building an ecosystem, if you will, a business structure and operation that we could execute on. And the most important thing is we're not obviously planning on running our own boats. We planned on bringing in partners to achieve that. And we were very fortunate recently to announce the partnership with Hornblower. Hornblower is a big ferry operator across the United States. I don't think it's down here so much, mostly Orlando, but it is very much in New York and the West Coast and Boston particularly as well. And so in working with them, we are able to be more efficient in our relationship with Regent and deliver the product in a much more, with the credentials required to get the operating licenses, work with the various authorities, etc. So in doing that, now we have a platform that is credentialed, we have the homogenized sort of setup of operations, and that will allow us to bring, if we're lucky, the product to market in 2027 when we get the first delivery. We were able to announce recently that we're the launch partner. So in theory, as a result of that, we'll be working very closely with Regent to make sure this rolled out in a very careful, deliberate way over the next 12, 18, 24 months. And to that extent, work with them and all the kind of, if you will, and Hornblower to make sure that it's all different missions, they can fly over land. We, as Adam pointed out, are water-based. We're a boat. Key thing to keep remembering we're a boat. It's hard to remember that sometimes. To that extent, we have a product that can go further than them, faster, as fast as them when we're over the water. And we can therefore perhaps create a whole, if you will, connectivity or a solution for the local environments, the cities or towns which we work. So I guess just, overall, without wanting to go on too long, I'm sure we can cover a lot of the...
We've got plenty of time.
I'm sure we can cover a lot of subjects, but, there is a lot of ability to work with partners, build infrastructure together, collaborate and make really strong use of this platform. I'll pause there because there's so much more to talk about, but
Yeah, why don't we like have a high-level discussion first, talk about like the big picture, and then we can get into the weeds on some of the service, if that makes sense. So, I mean, one of the things that, and I'm so glad New York City is doing something, because I actually shamed the former mayor into this when he was running for office the first time. I said, New York is supposed to be the most, and I'm a New Yorker, I dabble and have a place down here. It really is, supposed to be a hub of innovation, and I didn't see in the mobility side it was anything but. And so that whole project that they announced with the Economic Development Corporation, I was very involved in it. I was at the original meetings. It was great because when they put the RFI out, they really knew sort of what they wanted to do, but didn't exactly know all the nuances, which I think is beautiful. That's what you want to do, and it's a flexible entity. And this project is moving forward, and unfortunately, you guys aren't here in time for the World Cup. I wish this would have happened, it would happen a few years later, but you probably will be there in time for the Olympics. And I know that AAM is scaling up radically in the last year or two, and a lot of states are there. But let's get back to basics. I was floored when I saw and rode on a hydrofoil vessel, which is similar to this. It was a Candela vessel in Scandinavia this summer. We held a panel last year on the New York City project, which was great, actually right on the stage. And I got the sense from them in some of their comments that they didn't know exactly where they were going, and it's going to take forever, and they were talking about 10 years out. And now in the last year or so, it seems like it's been sped up dramatically. They're already like almost done with the eVTOL takeoff and landing. So I was really impressed, and I think a lot of people that are not familiar with the water and boats and ships don't fully understand the wake and the safety benefits. Maybe we could spend a little bit of time talking about the safety issue for this craft and the concept of a hydrofoil. You have these boats that are electric, some of them, and they're ferries, and they open up almost like a landing. You ever see like the World War II D-Day landings where the marine vessels, the front opens? That's kind of what these vessels do, and they charge with sometimes Tesla charging stations. I think they had a Tesla charging station on the dock. It was very easy, and tourists were eating it up, and they pushed me out. I met with the captain, and I was hanging out there, and they were yelling at us because we wanted to take the boat back, and it became viral on Instagram, and people wanted to get on it, and it was the smoothest boat ride. Somebody who takes Dramamine often, the smoothest boat ride I'd ever had. And it didn't occur to me until I took the vessel that not only are you avoiding the wakes of other boats when it rises up as the Sea Glider does, you can see it on the screen, but you're also not creating a wake for other boats. So why don't we talk a little bit about let's start talking about the safety benefits of the vessel. Maybe, Adam, you want to start on that, and then we can flip to Neill.
Sure. So this is some actually good video that's topical. Watch as the vessel comes up out of the water onto its hydrofoil and look at the wake behind the Sea Glider in that state. So keep watching the video on loop, and what you'll notice is that when our prototype is on foil, the wake virtually disappears, and the chase boats give you a sense of how fast they're actually going based on how much white water they're generating behind the boat, how much wake, versus the Sea Glider, which is creating almost no wake. So we did this like PR campaign that showed the Sea Glider in foil mode, and the tagline was "not great for wakeboarding," because there is no wake, right? Like that's the whole point. So how does that work? A hydrofoil is a wing for the water. So just like in the air, you are accelerating air over the top of the leading edge of the wing. That creates a pressure differential that creates lift. The same takes place in water. The difference is water's 1,000 times more dense. So we have this wing for the water. We accelerate that water over the top of the foil. That creates lift and brings the boat up and out. One of the big changes, though, if you fly in a modern airliner today, we won't count Boeing, but we'll talk about Airbus. There are some Boeings, too. But Airbus, for instance, is an all fly-by-wire flight control system, right? So there's no physical connection between the controls in the cockpit and the control surfaces, which change the way the aircraft, in that case, moves. So our vessels and many of the hydrofoiling boats that are out today have a control-by-wire system. So there's a computer that's actually modulating that hydrofoil and the control surfaces on it in real time to make the boat as stable as possible in the water. So we operate on hydrofoils for two purposes. The first is to dramatically increase the wave tolerance of the vessel. So when we're on hydrofoils, we can tolerate a much higher wave state, and that translates to a much a more comfortable ride for our passengers. But it also allows us to dramatically reduce hydrodynamic drag. So when we're on foils, we're not pushing all of that water out from in front of the boat. So think about what you see when boats are on the water, similar to these pictures here. Those boats are basically having to thrust themselves through the water, push all the water out of the way to accelerate. Well, when we're on foils, all of the fuselage is up and out of the water, so it's much easier to accelerate up to those takeoff speeds. What's great about these foils is they're active as low as 17 knots. So we can be on hydrofoils and still going quite slow, but they're also active up to about 60 knots. So we can be on hydrofoils and going quite fast. So the original question was, how does this contribute to safety? Well, first of all, you've got a lot fewer passengers puking their guts out on ferry rides. So that's good for everybody. Electrolytes, keeping those up is important, right? So we're grateful for that. The other thing it does is it allows our operators to maintain maneuverability at levels that are sort of unparalleled. So if you need to turn and those other things, you have the ability to do so on these foils. But one key difference between sea gliders and the rest of the product out there is we have a sensor suite that we provide to our operators that is unparalleled. So it's everything from forward-looking infrared to radar to underwater detection to a system called AIS that allows them to see other boats that are on the water. So the whole idea is if you take this from the aviation perspective, how do we maximize situational awareness for our operators, regardless of what mode they're in, float, foil, or fly, so that they can keep the boat safe, but still provide maximum comfort and ride control to the customers themselves. So that's a little bit of our angle on foils. Go ahead.
I think it's also interesting to think about safety and operation, like New York, obviously. The East River is just insane, the amount of wake, and it actually creates a lot of danger for the vessels and all the operation. We see some of our ferry partners running up and down there at like 30 knots or whatever, and the amount of wake and the damage that does, I think, to the obviously surroundings is big. This really will, if other ferry operators too start using the Candela stuff and our own product, then I think that would be amazing. The other piece of safety, which I think is worth thinking about, is the wave tolerance point that the foils provide, because when we're talking about those seaplanes that take off, which I think you've been on one, but if you haven't, when you go out of the East River, it's a pretty scary experience. But the point is, you're able to take off in very different sea states, so it really does provide a big opportunity. We were dealing with a big platform out of Hawaii just in conversation, and he had to return all his seaplanes because he couldn't make use of the product. This product and the way it's set up does provide a lot of versatility, and it's safer on the water in those slightly more edgy, if you will, sea states.
Well, and the next question on safety would be, who's regulating all of this, of course, and how is 25 going to sell this to the public too? I mean, are you thinking about with Hornblower how you get public acceptance? Because sometimes this happens with AAM and even with AVs right now. It's safe. We've demonstrated it, but the public needs to see it. They need to feel it. We all know, planes could pretty much fly themselves, but we don't see pilots not showing up for work. So how are we making the case to the public? Is the public acceptance just going to come from getting it out there, or what are some of the regulatory hoops you had to jump through to get the vessels approved in the U.S.? And who's regulating and that type of thing, and what assurances to the public?
So there's two sort of lenses through which to view this. First of all, the IMO is an international body that has provided wing and ground effect certification guidance for about 30 years. So the IMO has been working with regulators around the world to help them define and certify these boats. Regent is a sea glider manufacturer, so we build the boats, and there's a parallel pathway for certification. So in the United States, the U.S. Coast Guard is responsible for issuing a certificate of inspection, and that is basically deems the vessel is seaworthy and capable of carrying passengers. So we work closely with the United States Coast Guard to meet all of their requirements to build and certify safe boats for passengers. Once those boats are delivered, our operators work again with Coast Guard and what's called sector. So depending on where they're going to operate, they work with U.S. Coast Guard sector to approve specific types of operation. So if you're comparing this to the aviation world, it's certificate of airworthiness, right? That comes from the manufacturer, and then they work with the FSDO for their Part 135 approval, and that's to carry passengers for hire. In the United States, under maritime, you work with Coast Guard for the certificate of inspection, which means you can carry passengers, and then you work with U.S. Coast Guard sector for those operational approvals to carry passengers for hire. So there's actually a very detailed process associated with building boats that are found to be safe and seaworthy. And there's an equally detailed process that each of our customers will follow, beginning with the 25, to actually field those boats and begin carrying passengers. But when it comes time to actually do that, there will be a hand-in-hand effort, Regent as the manufacturer and the 25 as the operator, to introduce these products. So it starts with a very detailed test plan that is conducted by Regent, where we validate these vessels as safe and capable of meeting all the requirements of the regulator. Then it moves into a detailed training program. So in aviation, if you want to learn to fly a jet, you've got to have a baseline credential and then go to a school for multiple months to get your type rating. Maritime's the same way, right? So you're going to have to come to the Regent Sea Glider School with a 25-ton first mate or captain's rating, and then you're going to spend, roughly 4 to 6 weeks making the transition from mariner to sea glider captain. So well-built boats, well-trained crews, and then coordination with local regulators to begin operations carrying passengers on routes and in ways that are found to meet the operational safety requirements of those spaces. So that's one thing that people sort of get confused about. Well, if these things are going 180 miles per hour, how the heck are you going to navigate congested harbors? And the answer is operationally, we can be going as slow as 17 knots on foils or 5 knots in float mode. We can be going as fast as 200 knots on the open water, right? So that's where we work with our operators to really define what's the safe mode of operation for each given ecosystem, and how can they carry passengers, economically, profitably, safely, not necessarily in that order, right? In these different locations.
It's so if there's congestion on the water, you guys can just take off and go over it.
But we don't fly. Yeah, we don't fly over it.
No?
And that's a misconception, right?
I was going to say Boca Bash is starting soon with all those boats.
Yeah.
That would be a great way to get around it.
No, I love that. So that's a great point. That because we operate in ground effect, we actually operate at mast height, right? So we never go higher than about 30 to 40 feet above the water surface. The average sailboat mast is running 50, 60, 70 feet.
Are you allowed to go over other vessels?
We do not, no. So in terms of the way we maneuver through crowded harbors, we're just like any other boat. The only difference is we have this massive range of speed that we can operate within. And we have this incredible sensor suite that allows us to detect all of the objects around us and separate.
The Coast Guard regulates when you can turn on the super speed, right? Like what?
100%.
At one point from the shore, right?
That's going to be part of the operational definitions that go to our customers, right? So when they get their sector approval, they're going to define for the Coast Guard each of the places they're going to be operating at different speeds. And the Coast Guard will have blanket speed restrictions for spaces that are protected by manatee or otherwise. They'll have individual speed restrictions based on the training of the crews, the type of vessel you're operating, what's the tonnage, those types of things. This is this is regulated to the same degree you would expect an aircraft or any other high-tech vessel.
It isn't regulated like an aircraft in terms of the FAA, is it?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And
There is
what's the key regulatory distinction for those who are not involved in this field that gets it out of any type of regulation from the FAA?
It never leaves ground effect. So vessels
Height?
height, exactly. Vessels that never leave a wingspan to the water surface and operate exclusively over water are defined as boats. And that's what keeps it out of the FAA space.
It's quite an historical, they have regulated it for a long time.
That is the
right?
30-year IMO precedent that I was referring to earlier. For the last 30 years, it has been, maritime agreed knowledge. And by the way, this has been validated by EASA, this has been validated by the FAA, and this has been validated by Coast Guard as well.
I'm sold. Neil, how are you going to sell this to the public?
Well, obviously, horn blowers, well, we're not going to
Toot their own horn? Or
we're not going to do what
is it a bird? Is it a plane?
unofficially, we were told how Blade solved the concern by basically introducing rosé, but allegedly to solve people's concerns. Now, we are very focused with Hornblower initially in the very, formalizing the whole structure. The credentials they have, as you know, I think from your experience up in the New York area, they've been around a long time. They operate lots of different vessels. They even operate a electric boat to Governor's Island, I think it is. But they are going to spend a lot of time with us, certainly on the training program, making sure that they fully understand that, but as well, with that underpinning of an existing long-term player, we'll then start a campaign of communicating. We're going to launch initially off a charter-based play. We're not going to introduce mass services straight away because we're going to roll this out over time. And it's important to get it right and work with Regent to do that. So our kind of priority will be educate, slowly bring the public along, and slowly, as a result, deliberately get the product up and running into a scheduled service over time. So we're not going to rush it. We're going to take our time. We have the time because the first year we get two in 2027, late 2027. And actually, the plan is to do it down here first. So we'll obviously have to start working. We are now working quite closely with the authorities to try and work out solutions and how that might work. But then the next assets start coming to us in 2028. And again, it's a slow rollout. So we've got time to educate, and we'll spend that time and invest that time.
Well, today was a good day, actually. I think all of this EIPP and the movement that is really taking off big time, we have a panel this afternoon on that, is a good thing, like Joby taking off. That public awareness gets people more comfortable with it. So the big issue in New York was the noise, right? So Blade was, before Joby and Uber bought Blade, they were one of my clients. We arranged for all the car services and people to get there. And the big criticism was, oh yeah, Blade can get you to the airport in 5 minutes, but it takes 45 minutes to take an Uber to the Blade site, right? So I'm hoping that one day we're going to be taking off on top of buildings and stuff like that. Won't apply to you guys, but talk about the noise level. They actually, from New York, the community boards, there was actually an entity called Stop the Chop or something like that. So they went wild against the helicopters, and there's lawsuits in the Hamptons and all this other stuff. They hated the helicopters. They always have, and there's always usually a crash that happens every few years, right. Unfortunately. It resurfaces all this stuff. And then when they explained what Joby's doing, people are like, oh, that's okay. And then the environmental benefits. Remember, all these community board members, they're very progressive. They're all environmentalists. They're all thinking about running for office one day. It's right. Kind of like a breeding ground for future progressives, right? So is the noise level going to be okay? Are we going to have any issues with the community, or you think we're going to have smooth sailing or flying, whatever you call it?
Well, it's going to be 30 decibels quieter than a helicopter, which obviously is a big factor. So certainly,
is this quiet as the Jobies,
yeah.
or?
And it's 30 decibels less noisy than an equivalent aircraft. So
right.
The helicopters are incredibly noisy, and part of that is the motor noise, and part of it is to your point, the flap, right? So helicopter pilots adjust the collective to help eliminate that flap, to fly politely, is what I used to be told. Fly politely, stop making so much noise with the main rotor system. What's amazing about our system is that we've got these 12 electric motors, and those motors are all making noise in the rearward direction in level flight, right? Whereas helicopters or even eVTOLs, when they're in vertical mode, they're making all that noise in the down direction. But I'll tell you, even eVTOLs, if you go online and look at Joby or Archer's noise videos, the eVTOLs, eVTOL is electric vertical takeoff and landing. They are all exponentially quieter than a helicopter, and flying politely, right, making less noise, being less intrusive when you're operating near homes and neighborhoods and those types of things are really truly the distinction that allows this technology to eventually become ubiquitous, because it's the noise that makes people go, I don't want that in my backyard. So eliminate the noise and you accomplish that. So the eVTOLs are already doing that with their electric motors. Imagine that same level of noise reduction, move it 25 miles off the coast and point it in a different direction than where the people are, and that's how quiet it is, as in you'll barely be able to hear it.
I think that's the point as well, right? So we won't be taking off in a harbor. We're not like suddenly becoming full power in the middle of a harbor or port. So we'll be running on foil. So again, I'm assuming that we won't be using the same power levels, and therefore the sound will be a lot less. I also believe the maneuverability within the ports themselves don't require us to have all the engines running all at one time anyway. So there's a lot of kind of reduction in noise. I'm very well aware of the helicopter challenge.
And you're never going over land at any point in time,
No.
right? Okay,
No.
so yeah, that answers it. And on the other question, high-level carbon footprint reduction, I mean, that's important too. I mean, especially in New York in particular, there was always the issue of subsidies and pay. We'll get into that in a minute. But like just on the carbon footprint reduction, how much are we helping the environment with a craft like this compared to other ferry vessels that are out there?
I mean, as most people know, that that your carbon reduction is only as clean as the power that you're feeding into the system, right? So, assuming we're feeding off a clean grid, these vessels are zero emission. So when we're running analysis for our clients, one of the things we always show is the carbon offset on a route-by-route basis. In those European countries where there are significant credits, we have customers that have been able to generate or show the potential to generate about 150,000 euro of carbon credit kickbacks because of their carbon reduction. So, sea gliders will not solve the carbon problem, but whether it's eVTOLs, sea gliders, electric foiling boats, this is an important step that can help reduce carbon emissions and make all the spaces we live and breathe cleaner.
We're really excited about this as well, because there's additional behind, if you will, the charger opportunity, and we've done and announced a big partnership with a microgrid platform, and they really are allowing us there to operate in remote locations where there's sunshine abundance, not so much in the north at the moment, and that allows us to draw off different power sources. So to your point, it does depend on where it's coming from, but this microgrid system allows us to feed batteries that then feed the aircraft as required. So it's the aircraft, the boats as required. So we're super excited about trying to maintain that sustainability through the chain.
And how complicated, expensive, or what are sort of the operational components to putting the infrastructure in place? How easy or difficult is that, and where will it be?
You go ahead.
So, as Regent goes, right, I have sales ecosystems and data analytics, and the ecosystem team spends all their time working with critical stakeholders in markets where we expect our customers to launch service. And every market is just incredibly different in terms of what's required to get there. But one of the big advantages we have as a maritime operator is that we tend to bias toward some of the larger ports. And a big advantage of maritime is that those ports are already wired with 8 to 10 megawatts of power to get big cruise ships off their diesel motors and onshore power when they're parked. That makes for a cleaner environment around the port. So we we love being in this space, right? If you are operating in an eVTOL today, you've got to carve out space from an already very busy airport, and you've got to run power into that space where eVTOLs can quickly charge and take off and land and that kind of thing. And as somebody who has operated professionally out of Miami International for many years, there's no space for any of that, right? So if you can operate out of spaces that are basically already set up with charging, then you can provide that solution much more easily. Now, there are always going to be places where the charging doesn't yet exist, and that's where we can start getting into these microgrid opportunities, the repurposing of batteries to charge off-peak. So as part of the ecosystem engagement, we work with local utility service providers, we work with the ports, we work with the microgrid builders to make sure that our customer will have whatever solution that gets them to that clean power scenario.
And sorry, just to add on the end of that, the work is being already well undertaken by the Jobies and the others. So we're hoping to piggyback off some of that and/or collaborate with them to accelerate some of their development.
So it's compatible with their charging stations.
So we're obviously, if they have a fast charger using the same system, we have to obviously get more in detail on each individual product. But I have some experience with that. I'm involved in a battery charging platform for taxis in New York. Yes,
Which one?
We'll have a chat
Talk
about that
about it?
another time.
NDA? You want me to sign
it's
NDA?
a good investment.
I'm a lawyer. I have them in my pocket.
Yeah, no, we'll do that. But no, I had a fair amount of knowledge about this space. But ultimately, that intermodality is going to be a big thing. And if we can actually, use some of the work and/or collaborate with them in that work, and we can also provide them perhaps with additional opportunity in markets where we're very strong. Hornblower, again, just mentioning that for a moment, not for any other reason, they have a lot of infrastructure they control. And to that extent, we hope to make use of that. But that will
get
be
compatibility with these chargers. I've got to talk to Elon about that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and we have to go there. I mean, even with the phones, for crying out loud, you get all these different chargers. I mean, it's ridiculous. We need like a bill of rights for consumers. Speaking of consumers, how many? Last high-level question: how many passengers can fit into the vessel or the craft? I'm not sure what to call it. Do I call it a vessel? A vessel. How many people can fit in it? And that, you mentioned, Neill, congestion. We have congestion pricing in New York City. One of the big issues, especially with the city council, they've had oversight hearings with the EDC. I've spoken to all the people in the oversight committees, the legislators. Their big thing is affordability. That's the new narrative now. It's the new equity, so to speak. Though it's something that the Republicans like. So both the Republicans, Democrats, Socialists, Communists, they're all, what's that? 3 minutes. I thought we had an hour. Oh, okay. So much, yeah. So much for that. Anyway, affordability. Let's end with that.
Right.
Really, really important. Is this something that's going to be for the uber wealthy? People going to be taking these to the Hamptons, or how we get this affordable? And can you exist as a company without subsidies? Because that is the huge issue in New York right now. It's all Hornblower, all the other ferries. It's not affordable. The mindset of the legislator is that we can't do this without subsidies. And I'm hearing different things from the industry. So let's enlighten us about whether we're really going to get people off the streets and onto these boats, and is it going to be affordable for them?
So one of the big things we really, when we start, aside from looking at the dollar signs and the benefit of profit, which is what we are, a profit-making company, we saw
That's
that...
still okay, by the way.
Okay, good.
Right? I know you watch the news in America, and you might think otherwise, but it's still okay.
It's all right. So one of the things that was so attractive was the cost of operation, and that to us was the big driver to, if you will, the versatility of the product. So if you think about it through a business investing lens, you're looking at it from how do I basically look at the market opportunities, of which there are a number. Obviously, premium is an easy one to go after. Premiums gives us a large margin opportunity. But with that low cost of operation, it gives us another opportunity, which is to generate or put out a product for, if you will, an affordable product, and still not requiring subsidy. And so what we've also done there, just by way of application of that thought, is we started to talk to a lot of large businesses, and some we're going to have to talk at some point, Some are very, very large up in our area. A lot of it's about moving their employees around. And so there's a lot of about trying to connect people with different locations. So we're actually looking at partnering with those businesses to actually unlock, if you will, affordable transport. So it will be, initially, we're going obviously on the, if you were to test this through charter and so on, it will be very much premium in the beginning, but then the opportunity is very much there if we can underpin the business case with strong partnerships with local large employers. I think we could find the affordable product will be out soon.
Well, we just got the hook from Captain Hook in the back. So do we have time for Adam to finish up there, or?
I would just say I couldn't have said it better, so perfect, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry, sorry we had to cut it short, but I misunderstood the time frame. We don't have time for questions, right? Okay, so we're done here. But we're around, and if you want to join us, we're going to be hanging out tomorrow on a boat somewhere. If you know. Anyway, we're going to be continuing the discussion afterwards. So let's give a big round of applause for our panelists, and thank you for sponsoring last night for CoMotion. I heard everybody enjoyed it, so thank you.